Hey, security peeps, we are live with another edition of Breaking into Cybersecurity with Federal Career Connections. I am Renee Small, cybersecurity super recruiter, helping awesome leaders hire great talent. And I'm here with Chris Westbrook. Say hi to everyone, Chris.
Hi, it's good to be back.
It is good to be back. We missed each other last time, and now we're back in the middle of what seems like, so many tragic events happening all together. And it's hard, as we were chatting right before before this kicked off, to even stay focused, because we have so many things. Not only are hearts are unimaginably, I don't even know how to you describe what happened yesterday in terms of the school shooting, and then in Texas, and then the Buffalo situation, and then all on the heels of George Floyd after the past, 2 years, literally to the day.
Yeah.
It's just so devastating. So having you here tonight to chat a little bit about some of the things that the federal government, just as if from a career perspective, and some of the things that the help that's being provided is great. And then I know, Chris, we talked about potentially jumping into some of the stuff that the federal government is doing in terms of the Ukraine crisis, and how some careers could align to that. Looking for people to break into security from that perspective. So a lot of topics to keep us, engaged tonight. So I'm really, really happy you're here.
Thank you, Renee. It's great to be with you and your listeners. They always ask such great questions. They really
Yeah,
challenge me.
which is awesome, which is fantastic. So Chris, let's start out with, I know we chatted a little bit about like DE&I and what some of the things that the federal government is doing, or some of the agencies that you have been, in contact working with, have been doing in regards to helping people. And like you said, from COVID to your mental health to, there's so many pieces to the puzzle when we talk about um, all of this. So I would love for you to do that. Oh, and before we get started, I want to tell people, because I always forget this, is to please subscribe. And also, please shout us out and let us know where you are viewing from, because Steve Upshaw already said that he's viewing us from San Diego, which is awesome. Thank you for being here, Steve. Okay, Chris, go for it.
Sure. I was just telling Renee that in Federal Career Connection, a nonprofit I'm associated with, I'm the curriculum director for FCC. We just got off a brainstorming session on how Federal Career Connection can address diversity, equity, and inclusion in our once a month webinar programming. And one of the really interesting ideas that we're seeking to explore is, how are we helping affected populations within our various federal agencies to deal with current events that reach out and affect them, and in some cases affect them disproportionately based on their identity. For example, the targeting of Asian Americans after the outbreak of COVID, and some misattributions of the epidemic's origin to China. For example, the George Floyd and continuing police actions or other actions targeted against African Americans. The border crisis, and how those of in particular Latin American origin may feel further under pressure or traumatized by those developments, as people who are part of that identity. So that's something we're going to be exploring in Federal Career Connection. And I would love your thoughts and views on it. I can tell you from my agency experience in CIA, it's kind of ironic. CIA was a secret organization, but our internal communications were very robust. And I know, even though I'm not there today, that there were statements from the leadership about the school shooting. And there have been statements about other events that come up that affect or trouble um, our agency population. And that it's not just statements, it's having lunch and learns or making employee assistance program resources available to those who feel disproportionately affected or just overwhelmed by some of these things that are happening, whether it's COVID or something else. So I would love your ideas for how Federal Career Connection can address DEI and just other current events, and how they affect the federal workforce. Um, as you all may be thinking about joining the federal workforce, or even just sharing your thoughts about how they impact you in your current jobs and your career aspirations.
Well, Chris, I think that's awesome that Federal Career Connections is focused in this area. And I have had a number of conversations unrelated, well, I guess somewhat related or interrelated, even from the school level, like the elementary school level all the way through, because to your point, there's so many times when certain people that have from different demographics may be more impacted or feel the trauma more, or
Yeah.
it may hit closer to home more than others. And if you think about even regionally, like my friends who are in New York who were dealing with COVID, it was a completely different, conversation than some of my friends that were here in Northern Virginia, and even in DC versus Northern Virginia. Like it was just so it was so different, and you could feel. I mean, we were all stressed out, but growing up in New York and knowing those little small apartments and it's not the type of place, unless you have a lot of money or a really, really big house, it's not the type of place where you're at home like a whole, folks are crammed into those little apartments, and you're isolated, and the whole vibe of New York City is being out and being in, going out to dinners and being out and all of that. So when it hit, it was just so it was definitely a different level of stress, level of different things that people were dealing with.
Yeah.
You know, there were so many, I have so many little examples of folks when they were telling people, stay inside, and people just couldn't stay, and they would go out. And a friend of mine said, why aren't they staying inside? I'm like, you've never lived in a teeny New York City apartment. Like, you feel like you are suffocating.
Yeah.
So imagine that with small kids, and, like all of these various things that people have. So, I appreciate that FCC is taking that into consideration and understanding the population and how different people are going to be impacted and affected in different ways based on all of these various current events that are happening to us. So that's a really positive component to FCC.
And as I think about it, some of you who may be considering jobs in the federal government, it's affecting your ability to explore that or other future career prospects, right? And to actually perhaps get information, network, and even then the processes of applying. The fact that we've gone virtual, that there's all this ferment. And maybe you really do have some career goals you want to pursue, but all of that is just harder with all
Mhm.
these current events and issues hitting us.
Right, right, absolutely. So I know you chatted a little bit about, and I will give you all a ton of ideas. Let me just think about them. Think about what some of the areas, but definitely mental health. I think is a huge one, and having spaces for people to talk to each other and understand what other folks are going through, depending on the type of situation and how close to home it may hit. Um, so let's switch gears a little bit and talk about the career components. Well, staying with current events, again, we have a war raging in Ukraine. And Chris, you and I chatted a little bit about talking through some of what's happening in terms of career perspectives, or having a career in the federal government right now, and how the Ukraine war is impacting some of these roles, and what roles are, I guess, available for
Yeah.
people. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, so you all know, if you've looked on USA Jobs, that any jobs related to cybersecurity are still hiring priorities in the federal government. Um, and that there is a quote direct hire process that can expedite to some degree your consideration for federal jobs in the cyber field. So already a hiring priority in the national security agencies, whether you're talking DoD, the military services, or the different intelligence agencies. There's even probably more opportunity in the future as it relates to cyber and Ukraine. And let me give you some examples. Central Intelligence Agency and the other intelligence agencies are looking at Russia, Ukraine, neighboring countries, NATO, um, all of that as it relates to the Ukrainian conflict and where it's going. What are the Russian intentions? What are the Ukrainian capabilities to respond? And in the cyber field, is this crisis getting into the cyber battlefront or not? There's not a lot out in the news about that right now. There really can't be. It's what the intelligence community is gathering in terms of Russian or Ukrainian, cyber activity is going to be sensitive. But I can tell you that that analysis and that intelligence collection is definitely happening, and has been intensified probably to 24-hour operations. And not only, for example, how Russia may be trying to disrupt Ukraine's computer networks, as remember they did, right? Back in 2014, when they annexed parts of Ukraine, there was a huge cyber war going on back then. So are they battling on the cyber front now against Ukraine? What are Russia's intent or capabilities to perhaps retaliate against NATO countries, or NATO want-to-be countries like Finland and Sweden? And if they retaliate, could it be on the cyber front? And if so, how would that happen? How do we seek to prevent it? So you have the intelligence communities assessing that. You certainly have the armed services, the military services, and DoD looking at that from the defensive side in terms of how we protect U.S. equities, Department of Homeland Security, CISA, but also, the other agencies that protect our borders, protect our infrastructure, cyber or otherwise. Think about the U.S. sanctions and the fact that we are seeking to impose and enforce them against Russian entities, both businesses and individuals, the oligarchs around Putin, as well as their businesses. And how may Russian entities be seeking to circumvent those? especially on the cyber front. So U.S. sanctions imposition and enforcement and Russian efforts to counteract them, all areas that folks with a cybersecurity background are going to be addressing now. There are probably cyber implications of monitoring the refugees coming out of Ukraine. I'm just thinking about that now. And you all, with your comments, think yourself, what could be some of the ways that this Ukraine crisis is expanding on the cyber and the information front offensively, or what kind of countermeasures do we want the U.S. government in cooperation with industry to be able to take?
Right. Chris, we have a question.
Sure.
So Steven says, I am looking to break into cybersecurity next summer after my career break. How do I apply my 10-point VA preference letter towards federal careers?
Good question. If you are eligible for veterans preference, you have a formal letter to that effect, there is a specific hiring path you can take. And what you do is you go into U.S. jobs and you look for that specific hiring path for veterans. And it will allow you to see jobs that are open to the public, including veterans, and it will give you preference in that consideration based on your veteran status. So look for that both in your job search, and then when you go to apply, you'll see both opportunities for stating your eligibility for veterans preference. And think about, in addition to just that general oomph that your veterans preference gets you, think about what you did in the military and what your transferable knowledge and skills are. Because it's not just, there's so many specialties within the military where you will see counterpart positions in the civilian part of the federal government.
Chris, I have a question towards that, or a follow-up question with the counterparts, because I'm always confused. It's so funny. I had a conversation with a friend the other day. Steven says, awesome, thank you.
You're
You're
welcome.
welcome, Steven. Who I'm sitting here and I forgot to send her this link because she likely has a question. But how, and I said to her, this is kind of funny. She, she reached out to me in regards to applying to federal roles, and I said, I'm going to point you to Federal Career Connection. This is not my area of expertise, all that stuff. And I said, a lot of veterans, she's a veteran, will say, my 10-point preference letter, or, IMA, and they, say whatever it is, like a code like 27 dash, 15, dot 10A. How do I translate that? And we both laughed because I said, I don't know what that is, Chris, you made a point just now to say that there are the things that you did in the military that align directly to things that the federal government has. Is there some kind of resource that people have that says this equals that? That would be a phenomenal resource.
That's a good question. I am not an HR specialist. I can, however, say that government, civil service jobs in the federal government are categorized by occupational and job category. To the degree that they map with what specific specialties and job codes there are in the U.S. military, I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
But there is something called the Dictionary of Handbook of now I'm having a brain fart on the name. Handbook of
I think
occupational
that's
families. And it's
occupational what family?
Handbook of Occupational Groups and Families. And it's an OPM reference. If you just put Handbook of Occupational Groups and Families, you can find it online. And it breaks all the civil service jobs down into both professional jobs and then trade jobs. And then under professional subcategories like computer and information science, administrative, finance, different categories. And then within those categories are more specific jobs. And when you get down to that level, you will see the kinds of duties that a job with a certain title has. And if you look at your current military, job title and job duties, you can then map what you've done in the military or anywhere else, right? In your current job description in the military or the private sector, or with what the duties are in the civilian counterpart. And then you can apply to those jobs where there's a similarity. And then you need to argue about the transferable skills and qualifications you have. The veterans preference will only really come into effect if you otherwise meet the required qualifications, right? So you still have to make that argument on the fact that you have demonstrated skills and experience that maps to the required qualifications in any job opening you apply for.
Got it. Stephen wants to know, how long is the hiring process?
Well, OPM, the Federal Office of Personnel Management, has a goal of trying to get agencies to go from application to onboarding in 90 days. The current U.S. government average is probably about 120 days. And it's been getting smaller. But it really depends. And it will vary widely. If there's a security clearance involved, it's going to probably take 9 months to a year. But in other agencies, it's a matter of a couple, 3 to 4 months. So plan ahead. Don't quit your day job until the federal job comes through.
Do not quit your day job. So 6 to 9 months for clearance, 90 days on average for non.
Probably.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Sounds good. David put up the link to the occupational handbook. Thank you so much, David. We will definitely be utilizing this. I can't wait to dive into that, because
it was designed for federal HR folks so that they could classify their jobs accordingly. But it's great for applicants to see where you fit and what you're qualified for.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I still think that, especially from a breaking into cyber perspective, that the federal government space is such a great entry point, because the David said, I think David said he got it from the FCC's website. Yeah. So he got it from the FCC website. So more resources, go to FCC's website, Federal Career Connection. I lost my thought. So Stephen says here, geez, I do have a TSSCI from military service. Stephen, you are a hot commodity. I think I might recruit you myself. Oh my goodness.
But Renee, you were talking about the federal government as an entry point.
Yes, entry point. Yes. So thank you for keeping me together. So entry point for cyber, I think it's such a good entry point, because where the challenge is for corporations, or the folks that I usually work with, tend to be Fortune 500, and also private industry. And so a lot of the time they're really focused on that seasoned professional. Like they want mid-career, they want people that have experience. It's they will hire some interns, they will hire some entry level, but not as many entry level folks are looking to get in.
Yeah.
And the federal government is fantastic in terms of having kind of an open arms to people who just have the degree and the certification. So the folks who only have the degree and the certification and are trying to break in and they're brand new green, trying to do it through the federal government, I think is just such a great entry point and a great way to build skills, and to it's just figuring out how to get your resume aligned, and get chosen, get in the door.
Mhm.
But I think that there's so much more opportunity in the federal government for entry level people in particular, than in comparison probably to industry.
I
I
think
think
so, Renee. I also think that you can be in a more general IT field and hoping to or currently studying to get those cyber related security certifications, and the government can be a next step for you. I'm not saying, use some other IT type position as a foot in the door and to doing cyber, but it certainly happens that if you prove your value in a related IT, computer engineering field, it will be easier, to move laterally and also to get further academic and certification funding support from a federal employer if you've proved your value there once you get in the door. I got my
absolutely.
second master's degree 100% funded by my agency. And
It's
they also
wonderful.
gave me flexible work hours. I had
Hmm.
a schedule of working 9 days every 2 weeks and having the 10th day off, and
Hmm.
was able to do that throughout my graduate school career, as well as having the degree paid for.
Yeah, that's a fantastic perk. And I do know a few people who have done that. The flexible. I know there's a lot of remote opportunities right now. The flexible hours, 9 days, 10, is it 9, 10 hour days, something like that, whatever it is to equate to that amount. So the 9 days and, 1 day off.
Mhm.
And then just a combination of flexible work arrangements that just makes it an awesome entry and mid-career, but really from an entry perspective, I think more folks should be looking into opportunities at the federal government and figuring out how, listening to you folks, connecting with Federal Career Connection to get in the door there
Yeah.
for sure.
Renee, if I could speak to the issue of whether jobs in the federal government are remote or not,
And that would
or
be fantastic.
moving from remote back to in person. I know that's on a lot of people's minds. They're working remote and they would like ideally to continue working remote. Unfortunately, I have to say it's both a dynamic situation in the federal government, and there's no sort of general trend one way or the other. It ends up being agency specific and even component specific and even job specific within that. Um, the best practice, the agencies that are being conscientious are actually categorizing their job announcements in USA Jobs, whether it's remote or temporarily remote. But not everyone is doing it. If it says temporarily remote, that even if the job is remote now, there will be an expectation that you be on site in person, either part time or full time in the future. Um, So you will see a real variation in the current jobs, but don't, wish for or hope that something that says temporarily remote is going to remain that way. Um, you should really want the job and be willing to be in person at least part of the time if the job is not advertised as 100% remote.
And that's really good for people to know, because I do, that's one of the points that I hear all the time from candidates in this, especially in this current environment, where folks are leaving their jobs because, the company is asking them to come back to the office. So when you see that temporary remote situation, it's good for people to hear that that really does mean temporary, and does not mean that um, you are going to, it's temporary and then, oh, it'll be permanent. It's temporary, and the expectation is to be back in the office at some point.
Yeah. And the federal government probably has a disproportionate requirement of jobs that need to be in person, entirely or in large part, given classifications, given the personally identifiable information that so many government agencies deal with, Social Security Administration or IRS. Those people desperately need cyber folks, but they'll need you to be on site because of the sensitivity of the information or the
Right.
classification of it.
Yeah. Yep. No, I completely understand. Definitely understand. So, Chris, we are at the half an hour point, and I know this is a tough week for everyone. So, I didn't want to, um, stay on for too long if you didn't have any additional questions. So, folks that are online, if you have additional questions and you're watching, please let us know. Otherwise, we are going to cut this one short this week or this month and try it again with a longer version next month. So if we don't have anything else, I'll give it a couple minutes because I know there's a little bit of a delay. But if we don't have anything else that we hear from you all, we will wrap it up and reconvene next month, as especially right, I think right now, um there's so many there young people that are graduating. There's that summer kind of, the opportunity to get into, I don't know if the internships are probably all filled at this point. Internship
The summer
opportunities,
internship,
right? Yeah, those are done. So internships are likely all filled. And then but it's a great time, just to get into full-time opportunities for people coming out of school. All of that movement that happens right around this time is it's fun, it's exciting.
sure. But remember too, a lot of federal agencies will consider internships or co-ops during the school year.
Oh,
If
that's
you're a
good.
full-time student and you can get credit through a co-op program, consider the federal government for the fall.
Mhm.
And yes, the next FCC meeting or webinar is June 14th at 6:30 p.m. And it is focused on making your federal resume shine.
Mm.
A real brass tacks presentation by a senior executive in GSA, General Services Administration, and a hiring manager about how to deal with that creature called the federal resume.
It totally is a creature. And you said that's June 14th?
Yes, at
Yeah.
6:30 p.m. And you can register at federalcareerconnection.org.
Yes. Federal Career I'm gonna put that in the chat too. Federal Career Connection. Um, and David said noted, because that is a bear. Federalcareerconnection.org. Let me
Yeah.
put this in here so people know. Stephen, and the question, I always try to read the question, Chris, was when is the next FCC meeting related to the federal resume? So it's June 14th. And if you go to federalcareerconnection.org, you can get that information and be able to register so that you can learn more about the beast called the federal resume. Okay, awesome. And Stephen says, thank you all for the information and happy Memorial Day. Again, I am with you, Stephen. Chris, thank you so much for being here tonight.
My pleasure.
Yeah, we always enjoy having you. You bring such a wealth of knowledge. I always learn something every single time you come on, in particular, not that everyone, Alex and everyone else comes on, but I really, really learn a lot when you're here. So we truly appreciate it, and the audience appreciates it too. And so everyone have a good evening, and make sure you go to federalcareerconnection.org and sign up for the next few webinars. I think, Chris, you all have them once every 2 weeks?
No, they're now once a month on the second Tuesday of the month.
Okay.
I will also invite people to link in with me. Just mention in your invitation that you were watching the podcast tonight, and I will happily share my connections with you.
Excellent. Awesome. This is David. David saying, LinkedIn user David saying, thank you, Chris. So again, make sure you register. Tomorrow is CISO Thursdays at 1 p.m. We will be here. Friday is regular breaking into cybersecurity. So Chris Foulon, my wonderful co-host, will be interviewing someone on Friday. So we're still here Wednesday, Thursday, Friday this week. You get 3 days of us straight. Which is awesome. So have a good evening, everyone. And Chris, thank you again.
You're welcome.
Bye, everybody.